I spoke to Edward Chow, Senior Fellow for the Energy and National Security Program, and asked what Xi Jinping's trip to Russia symbolizes.
I think it's significant. It's symbolically important. Within, I don't know, a few days after he was elected by the National People's Congress to be embarking on his first international trip, and the first stop being Moscow, I think it's quite important. But as I am reminded that he came to the United States even before he was elected president last year. So it's hard to weigh the difference, but I think it's quite important.
You spend a lot of time on the energy sector, energy key on both sides. Talk to us about why.
Well, China, with its booming economy for the last 30-some years, is the largest energy consumer in the world. It is increasingly dependent on oil and gas imports from everywhere. And Russia, of course, is the largest oil and gas exporter in the world. So they're next door neighbors. There are certainly synergies that one would think can be achieved economically. I think energy is by far the most significant part of the bilateral trade between the two countries.
The Korean Peninsula is also kind of thorny for both of these countries and an area of concern. What do you see happening there? Do you think there would be a lot of talks about that as well?
Not sure. It's a little bit beyond my competence. But I think in this case, unlike, say, in Syria or in North Africa and elsewhere, China has a much more closer proximity, clearly, but also stronger interests in stabilizing the situation, the Korean Peninsula. Unlike other parts of the world, Moscow may sort of follow the Chinese lead a little bit in the case of Korea.
Just briefly, how should the United States be viewing this get-together, would you say?
Without alarm, I would say. It's quite natural for two large neighbors to want to cooperate closely together. If you look at the level of bilateral trade between Russia and China, it's really surprisingly small. $80 billion last year between the two countries. That's less than 2 months of US-China bilateral trade. So we have to put it in context. That it is something quite natural. It's not necessarily against anyone, at least on the economic trade side of things. So I think, including in energy, where more oil and gas that China is able to import from Russia means let's call on the Persian Gulf, let's call on the rest of the international system.
Edward Chow, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for coming in and talking to us.
Thank you.